Hello and welcome again. So, my guest today is Jim Kaskade. He's a Silicon Valley powerhouse who's led some of the most innovative enterprise and AI driven software companies of the last 2 decades. So, as CEO of Conversica, he helped pioneer practical AI agents now used by Fortune 500s, like Visa, for example. And before that, he scaled and transformed businesses like Janrain and DXC, building a reputation for turning strong technology foundations into commercial success stories. So he's an engineer at heart, he's a strategist by instinct, and one of the few leaders who truly knows how to bring AI out of the lab and into the enterprise. So, Jim, lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Rupert. Nice intro. Appreciate you.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Well, look, so good to have you here. And I think what I always enjoy is when I have somebody who's operating in this industry, but really has begun in this industry as a technologist, actually understanding the deep detail behind the technology that we think today as being very simple, but actually has had a long journey to get here. And I think reflecting back on that, I know we've spoken in the past about that you were very early in deploying some of those kind of large language models of yesteryears that were, I guess, the forefathers to what we all know today. Back in 2020, for example, I think you were kind of really using LLMs in an enterprise environment. And I wanted to just ask you what that was really like in those days, because it must seem very different from today. And what did you learn about the real world limits that AI actually had that perhaps today we take for granted?
Yeah, appreciate that question. I think a lot of people probably have spoken to I got so involved so early and they're trying to create a resume of being in first. For me, it's always been about applying technology. And I think as a CEO or a leader in any business, you're looking at the ability to create value. And the technology is just a means to creating value. So I never get too excited about technology other than what it can accomplish. The early days, I think we kind of walked into what's now Gen AI with a machine learning, deep learning experience. We can all talk about that historically. I was first exposed by the head of applied AI at Google in the CTO office. And so, neat title for a gentleman that I think is relevant even today. We care about applying AI. And this person on a walk at the Stanford campus was telling me about what was coming. And I think, at that time, we were 2 years after the Transformer was invented by DeepMind team. And Palm, now Gemini, was still in early kind of development. But Google had open sourced their first, equivalent to GPT-1 called BERT. And after that walk, after being invited into Conversica, we immediately started to jump in to see how we could apply it to an existing set of experiences that we had perfected with the current state of art on machine learning, deep learning. BERT, being GPT-1, had the same issues that we're all fighting today around confabulation, level of accuracy, layman's term, hallucinations. And, it was horrifically bad for any sort of use cases for the enterprise who cares about their brand safety. You can't have use cases where you're engaged with end customers or external ecosystem players, mostly customers, and have an AI, misrepresenting your brand. And my true experience was applying it to a very large set of customers that existed, noticing statistically that we would get less than 40% accuracy using the models back in that day. And that's probably being gracious. And as we, advanced, jumped into OpenAI's solution set GPT-2, then we just continued as the rest of the industry, GPT 3.5, 4.0, looking at all the other players. At Meta, it was BlenderBot, and then Llama. And I think the practicalities were tough. The realities were tough. We couldn't get the level of accuracy required by, large brands, let alone highly regulated ones. I think And I don't know, if the mindset has actually softened at all. I think it's probably gotten a little bit even more difficult around, I need 100% accuracy. I need these models to give me, what is essentially deterministic when
Yeah.
they're functionally probabilistic. So 40%, move to 60, move to 80, move to 85, and then you're trying to do unnatural acts to get to 100% brand, safe.
Yeah. How much do you think that comfort level? Because it's interesting that you've said the almost the further we've come in accuracy, maybe the further back we've gone in comfort level from an enterprise perspective, perhaps. And I wonder whether is that linked a little bit to things like agentic AI, in that we're also now thinking of AI in a way that says it's not even that we are going to generate things, it's that we're going to let it run with generating multiple things on multiple projects without our oversight or limited oversight.
Yeah. I think it's a thoughtful question. Look, as any leader in any of these Fortune 500, when you look at all the use cases and you're looking at how to apply the latest in transformer technology, I kind of put the functional skills of agentic AI into three buckets. One, you're using it to understand your end audience, call it end customer. So natural language understanding, obviously. You're using it to have a conversation. So conversational AI, natural language generation. And then the piece in the middle is the decisioning. Okay. Based on what I understand, based on my options of what I could say, what are my steps? What steps do I take? And what do I say? Not how do I say it. Gen AI is great on how do I say it. I'm going to give you an email I want you to rewrite for, this CEO of this Fortune 500. But when you look at the end to end, you need to understand, and you need to decision, and then you need to generate, and you need all three of those. And what I found, or my team found early on, was you really need more of a deterministic view of understanding, and you definitely need a deterministic view of what actions you take, because you're not going to administer mom's medication. You're not going to have the robot drive the Waymo for you. You're not going to do these things if it's powered by the transformer, where the accuracy level isn't good. And I think most recent studies, I was just looking at one where they were looking at LLMs benchmarked versus humans on just doing some basic things around the house. And, think vacuuming, thinking, laundry, with a 40% success rate. And these basic skills, we can get, unless we're giving it to our kids.
It's interesting. It's interesting, right? Because obviously, I think you probably saw that we have the Neo X1 robot was just released,
Yes.
and everyone's been kind of mad for it. And I think I saw a video of it attempting to load a dishwasher, which is kind of the thing that you get your kids to do as their first chore.
Yeah.
And yet the robot took at least 5 minutes to try and work out how to do it. And it's fascinating. And I guess this comes back to Jensen Huang's whole thing that he talked about at the beginning of this year about world AI models. And we really haven't cracked that at all. And I think, to your point about deterministic versus probabilistic, I think that's a really crucial component that people miss and perhaps don't even understand. That's how LLMs were built, right? The technology we have is probabilistic. It's not deterministic.
That's
fundamentally. Right. So I guess my question for you would be, and I agree with you, if we get to a place where world AI truly exists, and therefore we can do the more mundane tasks in the physical realm, to do that, we'd have to be more deterministic. But we only have really quite probabilistic models. How do we bridge the gap from what we know as LLMs today to a world where we have artificial intelligence that actually is built on something which is a decisioning engine rather than a probability engine?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, humans are somewhat probabilistic as well. I think, getting into the science of our gray matter versus the science of, the transformer, as it becomes more and more, effective. I think the generation of synthetic data to bias models in the right direction, based on reinforcement learning, all of the, I think, advances that we're seeing will increase the accuracy even in a probabilistic world. And we will begin to see specialized models for specific functions. So these small language models, or at least, specialized large language models. So I don't feel like it's going to be something that's going to persist, forever, where we're going to need a new breakthrough in an absolutely new type of AI, technology beyond the transformer. It's just going to be evolution. It's just a question of how fast is it going to happen. Do we get these world models? Do we get to AGI more quickly? And everybody has an opinion. And Sam Altman and folks aren't giving you the exact answer, but I do feel like it is it's going to happen. And so what use cases do you start with? As it advances, obviously you're going to do the things that are low risk, and you're going to look at job activities within the enterprise that make the most sense, and those have been very well prioritized. I mean, I think you can go top of the list, interpretation and translation. It's the best use case in the world because NLG is the least risky. And so I think that's the employment, group that gets impacted the most. I think, historians, obviously we can bring a little bit in, and with a little bit of fact checking, we can, and just, go down the list. In my world, it was sales development reps, sales representatives, and service representatives, that function can be highly automated. Customer service is probably the biggest one, with contact center, call center, that is being disrupted as we speak. Huge amount of revenue opportunity to optimize there. And then programming, around engineering, clearly an accelerator. And I think those will evolve into things that are harder, over time as the models become, more accurate or well governed.
Yeah. It's interesting listening to you talking about, and it's good, you're talking about accelerators, because I think, obviously in the zeitgeist, it's this whole concept of actually it's removing a slice of jobs from the industry. And to an extent, of course, any situation of change is going to do that. But if we as a set humans or community can't work out how to basically say we've still got the same amount of resource in terms of people available to do things, now we have this force multiplier in AI, right? We need to redistribute people's skills to apply them to somewhere where they can still get the 10x factor and they can still be valuable. That cycle sometimes takes a little while. At the moment, we've seen all the layoffs, et cetera, and at least at a high level, down to AI. How long do you think it's going to take us to go through the cycle of working out what the redistribution of skills looks like in the workforce, so that it can actually be acceleration by AI rather than, substitution by AI?
Yeah, it's going to depend on which function that we're talking about. I think if we look at where the Fortune 500 can benefit the fastest, I think the engineering teams obviously can be accelerated. And I think that means, you're getting, in my world, I was an AI company, so you were mandated to use all the accelerators and pushed every business function. And I think the engineering team saw 50% acceleration, which, I think in anybody's world, 2xing your capacity, is brilliant. So what does that mean for the teams? The new grads coming out of school that would then come to work for me in a AI, what's the term we want to use? Native, AI native company versus one that's still in transformation. I think if you're jumping into an AI native company, as a junior engineer, you have to have the curriculum already behind you, which means I know all the AI tools. And I know
Yeah.
them just like I know the traditional IDEs. I know the new and upcoming IDEs, the development environments around the use of AI. So that just becomes, I think, how quickly can academia step up to having the right curriculum that's been proven to work. There's a process. So I don't fear that our next generation will go into the workforce without those skills. Now let's talk about the non-AI native companies.
I thought we might go there.
And that's where it becomes, a bit horrific, because I think you first see the layoffs, because you just have too much capacity in the area that you've just now automated, and you're trying to, instead of train those people up, you're literally taking the benefits of EBITDA, which I think most of global enterprises are feeling the pressure on a quarterly basis. You'll take the benefits of profitability first, digest that, and then start to reinvest. And so what's the cycle time? It's less than a year, just because you're looking at one strong calendar year in the on the NASDAQ of how are you taking advantage of AI. There's an expectation. Here's how I'm taking advantage of it, and then you start to invest or reinvest again, right? So I think now, where does the investment dollars go? Now that you need AI trained people, where you're going to start to recruit the AI trained people, and you're going to start putting together AI curriculum that's specific to your industry vertical and your use cases in the organization. And then everybody lifts up, and we stabilize, right? We stabilize into new roles, more powerful roles, more high value roles.
What does that mean for the leaders of the organization? Because, the biggest indicator of whether you have success with AI in an organization, at least at the moment, appears to be empirically when the leaders use it themselves, rather than when the leaders say to the team, go and do a course on AI, right? And I think, so I take the point about, like, it's going to be hard to up skills on these people, but in some ways, it's just it's a non-negotiable for leaders today, as far as I'm aware.
It's totally non-negotiable. And so history kind of predicts the future. This is going to be a very well, I think, supported response. What did the leadership do when cloud came into the market? What did leadership do when mobile strategies were important? When social became an important part of engaging with your customers? Big data. What did leadership do with big data? I think, those that can't adopt quickly and get their heads into what's important, sure, they're not going to become the experts overnight, but they're going to hire as many people to consult them. They're going to, whether that's consultative or on staff, know-how. You're going to bring in your McKinsey, your Deloitte. You're going to hire, or upskill your chief data officer to make it chief data officer and AI officer combination. I think you're just going to move quickly. And then those folks that move quickly figure out what works and what doesn't work more quickly to stay ahead of their peers.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think one of the things we see in our industry when we're looking at leaders is that, and it's connected to what you just talked about, the advent of AI is reducing the reliance on data and knowledge, right? Because data and knowledge is becoming rapidly democratized, right? To the point we made earlier, is one of the best use cases is, right, I've got stuff at my fingertips. I can unpick an entire industry within 30 seconds, which would have taken me 2 days, right? So that having that knowledge is no longer particularly valuable or relevant. What becomes relevant is the skills, the capabilities, and in particular, what you just pointed out, which is the flexibility and the dynamism of being able to rapidly change direction. And I think one of the things we're noticing with leaders when we kind of assess them is the ones that are most valuable are the ones who are constantly able to evolve, change. That's like the core skill set within the world we live with AI. And I guess I'm wondering, from your point of view, I mean, we talked, I know, before about chief AI officers and stuff like that. Maybe you could talk a little bit about chief AI officers and how that reflects on this point about being dynamic and changing.
Yeah, I mean, I think before you jump to the role, let's just appreciate that all enterprises right now have huge AI ambitions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they lack the AI fluency. And I think the majority of CEOs, if not all, see AI is critical to their strategy. Excellence in the terms of AI enablement. I got to get AI literacy. Then I move from literacy to fluency, and then after I'm fluent, then I become a master. Right? I think it's the basics there. So as a chief data officer or chief AI officer, I think there's so many components of that role or expectations of that role, when in fact it's the whole organization's job to become AI literate, fluent, and masters. But sure, somebody at the top can provide the strategy and the plan, and there's various components of that, whether it's technology platform or its business process. And I think your point about change management. Okay, let's think about this for the C-suite. Starting with the CEO. I think the best CEOs of any industry vertical, any company size, are the ones that understand change management. One, change is the only thing that's constant, and
Yep.
Two, it needs to happen fast and faster now than it ever has. And three, you have to have a system to allow your teams to digest the change, whether that's organizational structure, whether that's the speed at which you make decisions, or the technologies that you're deploying and using, or all the above.
Yeah. So I am curious about one specific part of AI adoption, because I think it's a consistent issue for most enterprises, which is things like data security, compliance, and kind of ethics and things like that. It strikes me that, and I'll make a bit of a parallel here, which may or may not be relevant, but let's try. If we look at a tool like, for example, Dropbox, in the original days, it was really a consumer product, which became a prosumer product, which got used more and more and more by small teams and small areas of larger organizations, until the point where the organization had no choice but to adopt for many of those companies. And then obviously from there, we saw all sorts of other versions of file sharing and things like that. But one of the things that stopped them from ever doing it was a nervousness about that information being held in the cloud, et cetera, et cetera. So the starting point was people want to use this stuff. It makes their working lives better. And the barrier was it's scary. It might expose stuff. I personally don't see a vast amount of difference between that and the situation we're in right now with AI tools, which is, people are pushing for them. It makes them more productive. People want them at the bottom and going upwards. But from a top-down perspective, there is an absolute nervousness around, how secure technology is, whether or not it's going to leave open to legal, issues, etc. And I'm not belittling those things; they're important. But I'm curious to know your thoughts on how quickly we can solve for that, because we did it for cloud. There was all of that issue, right? At the end of the day now, when you're using an enterprise grade product of an LLM, it is being securely held in theory in whatever, Azure, AWS, right? So why is it any different? I just wonder whether you could talk to that. I always think it's an interesting topic.
Yeah. I mean, I think let's keep it simple, stupid. I think there would be a lot of CIOs and CISOs that would have, a much better answer. But I think the operating system of the business in the context of applying AI and governing it properly is going to require three layers. I think there's the data governance doesn't change, right? Collection, labeling, lineage, retention, and then there's the model governance is the number two, the documentation of the training data used, the bias testing, the performance drift monitoring. These things that I rattle off are just old as dirt, so to speak. applied from just traditional MLDL pipelines, machine learning, deep learning, to now these new transformer models. And then the third is the decision governance, right? The human in the loop, oversight, the escalation policies, the explainability. I mean, this is much like neural nets, and companies were built around models fundamentally based on, feed forward neural nets. This is like the black box problem. You got to be able to explain how it came up with its response, its decision, its action. So I think good AI governance, hasn't changed. It's applying the same older principles to just the new technology. I think it looks much like, evolution of the team DevSecOps. I think continuous monitoring, one-time approvals. I think the whole kind of management of this new technology. The only reason why I think people are feeling a bit unprepared is how fast it's ripping through the organization before applying these pillars, these old proven pillars. And I think if you met with CIOs of Fortune 500, they would say, I'm applying the same business process that I've applied to every new technology.
So let me ask you a related question to that then, because I think this is definitely a hot topic, right? For large enterprises, there has always been a sense or a feeling that you should go with the supplier of technology, services, whatever, that are the largest, most well-known brands, because it gives you a sense of safety. And that can be anything from using McKinsey at the board level for strategy consulting all the way through to using Microsoft for technology deployment, right? Now that we have such a rapid pace of evolution in this particular group of technologies, do you believe that A, those larger technology organizations can keep pace with that rate of development with the smaller organizations, and B, that the old adage still stands that they are going to be more secure, more kind of easy to make sure that you're not exposed as an enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, history predicts the future. You can look at C-suite that's willing to take bets on the emerging players who are nimble and very quick, versus waiting to be kind of the fast follower and consuming it from the bigger brands where you don't get fired for doing so. So it's just, are you in an industry, in a position where you feel like it's okay? My risk reward trade-off governs that choice. And my choice is, I'm going to wait till it's proven a little bit more before I adopt. I'm only going to work with, the larger consultants. I'm only going to work with the larger brands, Microsoft, et cetera. And I'm just going to wait, versus no, I'm going to maintain a number one position because I'm going to be the first to really figure this out. And therefore, I'm going to take a little bit more of a chance. I think that is a standard profile of A versus B. And then you have what you described with the example of Dropbox. There's some things you just don't have control over because your organization has gotten quick before you've kind of put the lid on it. And you get a little bit of, I think, groundswell in areas that you might not have chosen to do so. And then therefore, the camel's nose is under the tent, and before you know it, the camel of AI is in your tent. You may get a little bit of that. But I think these are all kind of historically the same thing. I just think, though, the one big difference is the $300 billion that goes into a privately held company. The fact that, we're investing in nuclear reactors and core energy infrastructure just to power, the current infrastructure in AI. This is something we've never seen, in the history of tech. So, and I think investments as well, that's going to dictate a pent-up demand for value creation. And a lot of companies are going to be under significant pressure to turn this into something real. And so, so I think that naturally just pushes people out of the comfort zone, in these C-suites where they may have been a little bit more conservative in the past. They can't now as much as they were. And so we're going to see a lot more trial and error, I think, than we have in the past, which then feeds into more innovation more quickly. I think a lot of AI project proof of concepts, pilots, applying it to business functions internal to the business as well as, external facing, and really kind of taking this like we did with digital transformation, kind of call it AI transformation, but at a faster pace across every function more quickly. So, yeah.
So I always ask this kind of as one of my kind of final questions, I guess. Keen to understand from you, if you think forward over the next 2 to 3 years, what excites you most about where we're going with this broader kind of subset of technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do like the fact that I can get a robot in the house and it costs about $1,500, but I doubt that's going to teach my kids, good behavior. so I'm somewhat excited about the fact that we're going to see, the current AI become the operating system to the humanoid era, and it's bound to happen. Where we just see it everywhere we go. So I do think the next 12 to 18 months, there's going to be a lot of talk about, automation that really touches us, at the layman's level. I think where people are going to feel pressure on their jobs. Sure, we can see maybe robots, delivering your food versus a person delivering your food. These things are real, and APAC and moving to other parts of the world. And so I think that's just a reality. A move from the fully digital to the physical world is absolutely going to happen. I think there's bets by Elon Musk on the valuation of Tesla shifting from where it is today to the majority of it being humanoids. So there's a big part of that in my mind that's going to become a reality just from the amount of dollars that are going into it. I think the ability to disrupt using data and analytics has always been kind of a passion for me from the time that I was an engineer in the data space. I think any and all businesses with long-term sustainable competitive advantage are doing so based on the leverage of data and analytics. With AI, we're getting access to more data at cloud scale analytics, and we're weaving in automation to the workflows that are wrapped around creating application business process. I think we're just going to see a scale up in all those technology areas to fuel any and all business application that exists today. I think ultimately there's not one vertical, there's not one horizontal use case that isn't going to have some level of acceleration. It could be as simple as I'm just going to change my UI UX using natural language generation. And so I have just simply a new way to engage with the existing application, to I'm completely rewriting the application from scratch with agentic AI capabilities. But I think those are just some of my, quick thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think many people would fully agree with you. It's going to have far-reaching and systematically huge of impacts on so much of society and particularly the enterprise. So I love this stuff. I'm excited by it. So I'm a believer in what you're saying as well.
And we want a better world. I think I'd love to see verticals of purpose truly get accelerated. I mean, Dennis has this focus on health. Obviously the DeepMind team, that gave birth to the Transformer have gone right to where I would love to see people go to, which is, how do we make healthcare better? How do we solve all 200 of the cancers by enabling it with this technology? So those are things that I'm intentionally excited about. and want to become more involved with, outside the standard, everything else. But yeah.
And then I guess probably a topic for another day. But when I think about things like health and progressing on that front, where I get also very excited, blends with AI a little bit, is the quantum side of stuff, because that's where you get the ultimately solving health issues is about processing vast amounts of data very rapidly and very efficiently, to the point where we just can't do it with common computers. When we get quantum really running and we're layering on great models, I think it's not Moore's law. It's like some crazy kind of exponential impact,
and that's within 3 years. I think quantum computing is around the corner. It's real. I think a lot of people are being mandated to be prepared for it by 2030, which is just around this corner. It's in our lifetime. So I think you're right. I think the combination is, and frankly, data and analytics and cloud scale has always been what's created such a hyper, nonlinear growth and impact overall. So quantum plus AI, you've nailed it. I think that's where it's scary in terms of the potential of it, what it means to everybody's life by 2030.
But it's definitely exciting. Well, listen, Jim, it's been such a pleasure chatting to you. I suspect we could go on for another half hour easily, but probably best to wrap it up here. But really enjoyed chatting. You've got some really interesting ideas. Hopefully one day we can get you back on again and do the same thing again. And I suspect even if we did it in 3 months' time, we'd be in a totally different world. So thanks again. Really appreciate your time joining us.
Thanks, Rupert. Appreciate you as well.